Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to do my review of WrestleMania 13. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is the Godwins versus the Headbangers versus Doug Furnas and Phil LaFawn versus the New Blackjacks in an elimination tag team matchup. Match itself, it was an okay matchup to start WrestleMania 13. Back and forth matchup with all teams involved. Bradshaw ends up pushing the referee. The New Blackjacks are now eliminated in this matchup. Doug Furnas and Phil LaFawn both get eliminated by countout. Mosh hits a Meteora, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Headbangers. Hats off to the Headbangers for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. It is The Rock versus the Sultan. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Rock and Sultan, with The Rock keeping the pace of the match. Rock ultimately hits a roll-up on the Sultan, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is The Rock. After the match, though, Sultan and the Iron Sheik attack The Rock, and then Rock's dad, Rocky Johnson, makes his way down to the ring to save The Rock. But hats off to The Rock for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Goldust versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Goldust and Helmsley, with Goldust keeping the pace of the match. Goldust hits a devastating power slam on Helmsley in the middle of the ring, and Hunter ultimately hits a pedigree on Goldust, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Hats off to Hunter Hearst Helmsley for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Owen Hart and the British Bulldog versus Mankind and Vader for the WWE Tag Team Championships. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Owen and the Bulldog keeping the pace of the match. Vader hits Bulldog with the urn on the outside. Mankind then applies a mandible claw on the British Bulldog on the outside. Referee ends up sounding for the bell, and this match ends in a double disqualification. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a submission match. It is Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Hart and Austin, with Austin keeping the pace of the match. Austin and Hart both exchange in the middle of the ring. Austin hits a stunner on Bret Hart. Austin then hits Hart with a chair shot. Hart then sends Austin into the guardrail. Austin is busted wide open from that. Hart ultimately applies a sharpshooter on Austin, but Austin never taps out. Referee, which was special guest referee Shamrock, sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match is Bret Hart. Hats off to Bret Hart for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is the Nation of Domination versus the Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson in a street fight. I thought this was a relatively good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between both teams. Animal hits a huge botch pile driver, which was absolutely horrendous. Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson are keeping the pace of the match, though. And then the Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson ultimately hit Crush with a 2x4, pins him for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson. Hats off to the Road Warriors and Ahmed Johnson for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WrestleMania 13. It is The Undertaker versus Sid Vicious for the WWE Championship. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Taker and Vicious, with Taker keeping the pace of the match. But Undertaker ultimately hits his signature tombstone on Sid Vicious, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Champion, is The Undertaker. Couple of things I'm going to say about WrestleMania 13 before I get out of here, man. Number one, it definitely was not the best WrestleMania I've ever seen. That's a fact. A couple of matches that were booked on this card, I honestly could have done without. The opening matchup seemed very lackluster. You had the Godwins versus the Headbangers versus Doug Furnas and Phil LaFawn versus the New Blackjacks. All in all, I mean, it was an okay matchup to start WrestleMania, but it wasn't the best. The Rock versus Sultan, I thought that match was absolutely horrendous. Personally, I think Sultan was probably one of the worst characters that WWE ever came up with, in my honest opinion, one of them. Goldust versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley was a decent match. The Owen Hart and Bulldog match versus Mankind and Vader was a solid match, but I only wish that we got a concrete winner in that matchup. Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in the submission match, in my honest honest opinion, should have been the match that main evented WrestleMania 13 over Taker versus Sid Vicious. You know, if anything, Taker and Vicious could have been the co-main event and had Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin as the main. It was a huge storyline back in the day between Bret and Steve Austin, two of the biggest rivalries in the company at the time. And the match itself was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And having the storyline leading up to that match, and we get that phenomenal match between Hart and Austin in that submission match, was absolutely phenomenal. So, but like I said, it definitely wasn't the best WrestleMania. If I had to give this WrestleMania a rating from 1 out of 10, I'm probably going to give WrestleMania 13 probably a solid 5, maybe 5.5 at best, man. But this is my review of WrestleMania 13. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.